It's a really important thing to feel purposeful, to be intentional in what you do every day, not just because, you get a paycheck from it, but because you're doing something good for someone.
We recognize genius wherever it exists. And if you're known by the company you keep, we are proud to not only spotlight the women that are part of Rockefeller Capital Management's unique network, but also welcome our brilliant audience members.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Sario, Regional President of Rockefeller Global Family Office's Southeast Region, and welcome back to Genius Loves Company. Everyone has a story to tell, and we're excited to hear from some of Rockefeller's top private advisors, investors, senior leaders, and women in our broader network about the life and career experiences that got them here and the insights and perspectives that they've gained. With me today is Angie Newman, one of Rockefeller's leading private advisors. Angie brings decades of experience to her role as Managing Director of Chase Newman Riordan Wealth Partners, based in Florham Park, New Jersey. She guides clients through the complexities of managing their wealth across periods of both growth and volatility. Her lifelong passion for investing continues to shine through as she educates curious clients on how they can participate in the markets to pursue their most important goals. Welcome, Angie.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Excited to hear more about you, both personally and professionally. Let's start right at the beginning. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Very beginning.
Okay. I was born in Staten Island, New York. At a very young age, I think I was in maybe the first or second grade, we moved from Staten Island to Bedminster, New Jersey, which was very unknown. It's known now because of our president and his golf course there, but it was farmland. So it was a bit of a culture shock for my parents, who were Staten Island natives, but I grew up there loving it.
It sounds like a really big change, but
Yes.
I think there's a lot to be gained from both experiences. So tell us a little bit about your family and tell us what your upbringing was like.
So at that point in my life, my dad was a sole proprietor of a retail store. He sold artificial Christmas trees. And this is in like the 1960s and 70s when those were a fairly new commodity, and all of the trimmings that went with them. He eventually branched out to more home goods that were not just seasonal. And he continued to open up a few stores around Staten Island and in New Jersey. This was all right before the Jimmy Carter era, when we went into a recession. Interest rates were 17, 18%. My dad had a lot of leverage on his companies, and things did not go well with all of the debt that he had. And so our family went from living on 10 acres, having horses and private schools, to having our furniture repossessed and having my private school headmaster come in and say, you need to leave because your dad didn't pay the tuition bill. So these were things that I remember as a child, as I was growing up, that, have a lot to do with my relationship with money, because our world changed after, 5 or 7 years of thriving in this wonderful life. And all of a sudden, things just turning around and going south fast.
It sounds like so many of your experiences were really formative into what you do and who you are today. And I feel the same. I look back at some of the experiences I had, some of the decisions that my parents made. We downsized for many different reasons when I was in high school. And that's formative and was helpful to me as I was coming into this business and helping to give advice as well. So we'll get into that.
Mm-hmm.
You and your siblings were the first generation in your family to go to college.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Walk us through what that experience was like for you.
Because of where we had grown up, everyone went to college. My father was a product of immigrant mother and father who came over from Italy, barely spoke English. My mom's dad died when she was very young, and my grandmother had to do various odd jobs to sort of keep the family alive. So there was no money in their original families. So when we went to college, I actually went to college. I skipped a year of high school and went straight to college after my junior year. And I just really wanted to get out of Dodge because at that point, all of the financial stresses that our family was going through wreaked havoc on my parents' marriage. And they wound up getting divorced. And it was a really, difficult time as I was then, 17 years old, 16, 17 years old. What I do remember, even though my mother had not been college educated then, she did eventually go back and get her college education, was her being so mad at herself for not knowing what was going on financially in our life as a family. So when things kind of came tumbling down, she was just as surprised as we as kids were. And that was a conversation. The first time I remember my mother actually admitting that she was wrong for not being more involved. And as a kid, you don't really remember your mother saying they were wrong too much. You think they know everything and they're smart as can be, right?
Generationally, though, that has changed so much over the years because I think about talking about money with my parents versus their stories of not having those conversations with their own parents. And I think about when I sit down with my daughters, who at this moment are 18 and 20, and we talk about everything and you try to set that foundation. I think it's changed a lot generationally, but what a great moment for your mother to not only have that realization and to share it with you, but then also to go back to college.
Go back to college.
Mom.
And guess what? She became a stockbroker. She answered an ad in the paper. First, she took a couple of jobs, like she was a receptionist and a bookkeeper, and again, unable to make ends meet. And she saw an ad in the newspaper for a stockbroker trainee. And she just went for it. She said, I know nothing about finances, but I want to learn everything because I never want to be in the position that I was in before. So she became a stockbroker, God bless her. And she actually had a really great career.
Wow. It sounds like her curiosity in finance and money maybe lent itself to your interest, perhaps, not putting words in your mouth.
I saw her get us out of a hole. Yeah. I saw her be able to support the family and, go from this third floor walk. We went from this big house to this third floor walk up on the other side of town back to a nice, life. And, she got her life on track. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do, when I get out of college.
Well, you had those formative experiences that maybe helped create your view of money. But what is your earliest memory of money?
My earliest memory of money was getting an allowance, doing odd jobs around the house, babysitting. I mucked out stalls. There was a fox hunting club near where we lived. I used to take care of the hounds. I did everything. And I spent my money on riding lessons. My parents said, if you want riding lessons, you have to spend your own money. And I did. I remember I had a Buxton's ice cream plastic container that I kept all my dollars and change in and counted it. And every time I had enough, we called the horse trainer and I got a lesson.
It's interesting. So one of my very first jobs as well was mucking stalls at a horse stable. And I also rode. And whereas my parents were in a position to pay for my riding lessons, I fell so in love with the entire experience of being in a barn with horses. And the hard work was such like a passion project for me.
Loved it.
So switching directions a little bit, you experienced major financial changes early in life. We've talked about kind of those formative experiences. Tell me some of the lessons that taught you along the way. You've named some of them, but what else?
I think mainly that you just never know what's going to happen. And certainly my decades in this business as an advisor and a portfolio manager has proven that to be so true. And as a result, you got to always save for a rainy day, live below your means. It's not important to show the world how much money you have by buying big, fancy, shiny things. It's more important that you know that you have the security come what may.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I think one of the early lessons I learned was, don't spend more money than you have.
Mm-hmm.
And it really helped me. That one simple phrase really helped me even when in college, when you're getting 25 credit card applications
Right.
a week and you think, oh, this sounds great, but
That's right.
didn't really understand the complexity of what credit meant at that time. So you've mentioned your career a few times and what you do. So let's talk about your career. How did you first get into this industry? What inspired you? Well, you've talked a little bit about what inspired you to get into this career, but talk more about your journey into becoming a private advisor.
So again, having seen my mother have that success, I went into some different finance jobs right out of college. I worked as in a structured settlement annuity, presenting structured settlements. I worked at an annuity insurance company. And, by the time I was 23, again, because I was young getting out of college, because I was young going into college, I was like, I'm ready to be an advisor. So I said, okay, Mom, can I come and work with you? And she said, absolutely not. Go out and figure it out. And at that point, I lived in New York City, and I think I interviewed with every single brokerage firm in Manhattan. And I had people tell me, for those who I could get an actual interview with, why don't you go get some sales experience? Maybe you could sell some Avon. Maybe you could work at Saks. And I was thinking to myself, that was just humiliating. I was flat-footed trying to pound the pavement in Manhattan. And so I trickled out to New Jersey, finally found someone in more southern New Jersey that would hire me. And he said, you know what, I like what you got. I like your confidence. He said, I don't know if I can hire you. I have to ask my regional manager. I have to get the okay. But I like you. And if he says yes, I'll hire you. But I'm only going to pay you $20,000, which was like below the lowest limit because of my experience or lack of. So I waited and waited, and he called me a couple of days later. He said, I'm really sorry, Angie, but they won't let me hire you. And I said, well, who is your regional manager? And he gave me the name, and I said, well, where's his office? And he said, it's in Red Bank, New Jersey. And at the time I was working here in the city. I didn't own a car, but I went and rented a car. And I literally feigned being sick to my stomach at work. I went and rented a car, and I drove to Red Bank, and I sat there for about an hour and a half until he saw me. And I said, you're making a big mistake. So he was like a deer in headlights, probably wondering, what the heck am I going to do with this young lady, And he finally gave the okay to hire me into the training program, which was then Shearson Lehman Brothers. It was a great training program. It was, put me up in the World Trade Center on and off for a period of 2 years, back and forth between branch and there. And it was really good training center.
Well, I love that story. And it sounds like you ultimately got your sales experience by being in the business. And I think sales experience is incredibly important, but to do it directly in the business, congratulations, you showed up. Oh, yeah. And I think half of this is showing up.
Yeah. Training was all about cold calling then. Mm-hmm. That was training. The number of dials you needed to make a day, what your script was, what were you selling, that was training. And, that's all we had at that point.
It's interesting that you say that. I remember being in a big room, and there must have been 100 of us, and we each had a phone in front of us, and we had to bring to training our call list. Mm-hmm. And then somebody at the very front of the room was on a switchboard listening in on our different calls. Yes. So you couldn't even fake it.
Yes.
You couldn't even call a friend, or you really had to be making the calls. And it was so nerve-wracking. But I'll tell you what, today, I'm not afraid to call anybody.
No, me neither.
I will call anybody because of those formative moments of being, sweating in my seat to get it done. So talk about today. Talk about your role at Rockefeller. What motivated you to join our firm and, after so many years of being in our business?
So, I came from wirehouses. I was decades at my prior firm before I came to Rockefeller. And I grew my business. And, I eventually worked with my mother for a few years. And then she left the business. She unfortunately died young. And I was, by that time I had 3 little kids and no partner. And I was really sad. I just was really gritty and I grew the business. I think when she left the business, I think we had, I'm not kidding, $30 million in assets. And that in the 1980s was a pretty big book, $30 million. And again, I was really gritty. I had these 3 kids. My first marriage didn't work out. I was responsible for my children financially. I had them in private schools, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to repeat the same thing that my dad did. I'm going to, all of a sudden be in a situation where I can't afford this lifestyle that I've now gotten them accustomed to. By the grace of God, I pulled it out. And, even with my divorce, even with the financial crisis, even with, I actually had cancer. I had to be quarantined for a year while I was on chemo. Nothing stopped me. And that was coming up to maybe 10 years ago. And by then, my kids were, I had three sons, and my youngest was just getting out of college and launching on their own. And I had such an experience while I was quarantined, going through my cancer treatments. It was, I don't know what else to call it other than a come to Jesus experience. I mean, I'd always gone to church. I was always a believer. I had friends in my community who used to always invite me to their Bible studies, but they were at like 11 o'clock on a Thursday. And I'm like, I can't do that. I have a job, But when I got sick, they came to my home and they prayed over me.
I get emotional just listening. That's what this is all about.
It's still, to this day, was such an emotional experience. And they said, when you're done with this quarantine, you are going to come to Bible study. And I started coming to Bible study, and I haven't stopped since. And I had this quiet time again. My kids were out of the house. All of a sudden, this crazy life that I had been living before on roller skates, literally, as a single mom raising 3 kids, trying to grow a business, became just a standstill. And I had a lot of time to think about my clients. How did I get my best clients? How did I get here? How did I get out of these tough financial times? And I realized that every single one of the clients that really helped catapult my business were people that I had an authentic relationship with. They weren't people I cold called. They weren't people that I said, oh, I'm going to this, networking event. I'm going to find a client. They were people I met as I was going through my life. And that really made me change how I treated my business when I got back into the business. It also, through my faith journey, made the grass greener. It made the sky bluer. It made my conversations more deeper and more meaningful. And I really felt like I'm going to be different now. And as I almost detached, I had already had a good business. I knew I wasn't ever going to be poor. And as I detached from the monetary value of relationships and living my life, ironically, my business doubled and tripled because I was doing it in a more authentic way. How can I serve people? I can tell you a story of how I got my biggest client that really changed my business was a widow that lived next door to me for years. I thought that she was poor because, I would run errands for her sometimes because she didn't like to drive in the bad weather. And I'd come back and with groceries that she asked me to buy. And she'd say, well, how much is it? And I'd say, I don't know. It's $10, $20, whatever it was. And she said, well, let me see the receipt. And she would go through it with a fine-tooth comb. And I always felt that she was, in trouble. And then one day she said to me, I have some stocks in a safe deposit box in a bank across town. And would you drive me there? And can I open an account with you? Because I'm sick of getting all of these dividend checks. And I was like, sure. And one day I went to pick her up to go to the bank. And she had these 2 shopping bags on her lap, folded up shopping bags. And I said, what are those for? And she said, these are for my stock certificates.
Oh my goodness.
$30 million. And then I said, I'm really glad. At this point, she was in her late 80s. I said, I'm really glad that you did not go to meet the Lord yet and leave your daughter with all of these stock certificates. It would have been a mess. And she said, well, my daughter has the same thing. And then I got that. So that was pivotal. And to this day, the daughter is still not only a great client, but a wonderful person and a dear friend.
It sounds like you've had so many moving themes. I heard you say, by the grace of God, your come to Jesus moment, gritty. I've heard you say I'm gritty a number of times, and that once all of these things came together, the grass was greener, the sky was bluer. And I love that. And then you said, I'll never be poor. And I imagine what you mean by that, probably not a monetary comment, but probably much bigger than that as well. You talk about your clients, very relational, how you serve. What about other individuals that have had an influence on you personally or professionally along the way? Any mentors?
You know, other than my mother, she was tough, I'm telling you, but she was smart. And I think I got my scrappiness from her. Again, she went back to college when she was in her 40s. She became head of the chairman of the board of her college. She went and got her CFP. She created a financial planning tool. We were the first team, if you will, this is in the 90s now, to have like a big computer in our office that like we could input information, financial planning information, and it would spit out a document, a financial planning document. There were no tools like we have now. I really can't think of anyone who influenced me more. And it was more, again, her coming through rough times and just never giving up. Never giving up.
She sounds like an incredibly special, gritty individual. Yeah. And I feel like I'm getting to know her even here.
Yeah.
So that is wonderful and beautiful in so many ways. You talk about your business being relational, how you're serving your clients. What do you think you do differently than other advisors, and what do clients really value most about working with your team?
I came to Rockefeller after being in the wirehouse world because I loved how, Greg Fleming calls it collegial, but I love how holistic Rockefeller is. I was really impressed with the people that run those programs that now my clients at this point in my career were high net worth people because their wealth had grown. And I thought, this is where I'm going to have the tools to really serve them on a whole new level. In terms of relational, I realized when it's scary moving business, asking people to, move their 10 accounts and all of their bill pay and tax information and everything else. I had a lot of stress about asking them to do that. It wasn't that I didn't want to move prior. I just was always so afraid to ask my clients to go out of their way. But I realized when I started calling them how much I really did do for them and how much they valued me. I always thought of how much I valued them. And I was always trying really hard to just always do the right thing for them. And am I good enough? Are they happy with me? What can I do for you? Then I started hearing why they were so eager to sign up and come follow me to Rockefeller. And it really made me feel very purposeful. And I think as women especially, it's a really important thing to feel purposeful, to be intentional in what you do every day, not just because, you get a paycheck from it, but because you're doing something good for someone. And I had people say to me, oh my gosh, I would have never retired if it wasn't for you. I would have never sent my kid to college if it wasn't for you. We would have never had our beach house if it wasn't for you. And it wasn't just about that. It was about, again, the relationship. Our conversations take all kinds of twists and turns when we're talking about money. Now, with all of the wealth that has been made in these markets, especially, our conversations are often turning to legacy more than ever. Not just, who am I going to leave my money to, but do I really want to leave all my money to my children? Or do I want to set them up with more of a giving mentality vis-a-vis a foundation or a DAF? And again, we go really deep in those conversations about all kinds of things. So I am so grateful to feel like every single day I am making a difference. because I don't think it would be worth it if I wasn't.
Well, it sounds like you just very clearly defined what motivates you. And if purpose and making a difference is what motivates you, keep going, because that's incredible. And you're doing great work before here and here. And what a compliment to you that not only did your clients follow you, but reciprocated in that value back to you. We've talked about, and I know how successful you are personally and professionally. Is there an achievement that comes to mind that you're especially proud of?
I mean, I'm especially proud of, my 3 sons and the people that they are, the humans, the adults that they've become, not just in their work, but in their relationships and how they handle themselves. I'm so very proud of their kindness and their love for each other, their love for me, their friends. I would adopt any single one of them. I really would. Their partners in life. I would have to say it's my boys.
Sounds like you have raised 3 incredible humans.
Yes.
So let's shift gears for a minute, because I want to hear more about you. What are your hobbies? What do you do for fun? What do we not know about you?
I've had 2 holes in one. And I'm not that good of a golfer either. So it makes me seem
you
like
didn't even hesitate.
No, I know. Well, I said to my kids, make sure you say that at my funeral, because no one would believe it if they ever played golf with me. So no, I do like to play golf, and all 3. That was how I related to my boys. Anybody out there who has sons knows, especially when they're teenagers, you can't sit them down and say, I want to have a conversation with you and learn anything at all. You've got to be walking their walk and talking their talk. And so we were lucky enough to have a golf course right around the corner from our house. And they basically grew up going to camp there, and they all became very, very avid golfers. And I played golf with them, and we still do it. We have a home in Florida where we play golf, as well as in New Jersey. And they were all down for Christmas. And the first thing they said was, Mom, just set up tee times every single day, Fortunately, I also married someone who likes to play golf. I just got remarried, so I was 10 years between the time my first marriage split up and the time I got married. I think was 9 years. So it was a long period of time that I was not married, and now I am, and I'm super happy and feel like I pinch myself every single day. I just can't get over how blessed my life is. So I do a lot of other things besides play golf too, but I just had to mention my holes in one.
Well, I'm pretty proud of that, because I can hardly hit a golf ball, let alone get it into the hole, and I certainly couldn't do it as a hole in one. So I will tout that as often as I can.
And both of them were at like top 100 courses in the U.S.
I mean, this even gets better.
I was not at the putt-putt.
It's interesting. I have 3 children as well, 2 daughters and a son. And whereas I don't set up tea times because it wouldn't do either of us any good, I do a lot of dishes. My son likes to bake, so I'm constantly doing dishes, but that's the time when we connect. Mm-hmm. If I can come stand in the kitchen with him and I do the dishes and he's mixing something up or baking or experimenting with a new recipe idea, that's where we really get the most out of our conversations, or in the car on the way to school. I get to take him to school, once or twice, maybe 3 times a month, but the rule is no phone. If I take you to school, it's so we can chat, and he knows it, and we both look forward to it. So when you said meeting them where they are, I don't know if that was your exact phrase, but
I do use that phrase a lot.
I feel like I have to do the same thing. I have a favorite question. Everybody who listens knows it. I ask it every time, but I'm really interested in where you are on Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock.
So I start every day. I try to start every day reading scripture. And even if it's just for 5 minutes, on Saturday I have more time than usual. So that always grounds me. And then I am off to, an exercise class. I have 2 dogs. I'm walking the dogs, going grocery shopping, doing laundry, all that normal stuff. And I'm always hesitant to talk about how faithful I am, because some might think that I'm, some goody two-shoes perfect person. But the reason that I'm so dedicated is because I'm so imperfect. And I am always trying to be better. better in those terms. We can all be better worldly in our own ways. But, even with all of my age and experience, I'm still excited about all I don't know and all I have to learn in that arena.
Well, there are a couple clear themes that I've picked up, and I'm so excited that we got to do this today. But when I pass by you in the halls at Rockefeller, these words and phrases are going to go through my mind, and it's gritty, it's by the grace of God, it's led by faith, and it's perfectly imperfect. So Angie, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your incredible story, and thank you to our audience for tuning in. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Genius Loves Company. To learn more about Rockefeller Capital Management, visit rockco.com or keep up with us on LinkedIn or Instagram. This material was prepared by Rockefeller Capital Management. The views expressed of the hosts and guests in this episode are as of a particular point in time and are subject to change without notice. The views expressed by the speakers are solely their own and may differ from or conflict with those of other divisions in Rockefeller Capital Management. This information was provided for illustrative and educational purposes only. It should not be construed as an investment recommendation, investment advice, an offer of Rockefeller investment advisory or brokerage services, or a projection or illustration of the performance of any particular investment or strategy offered by Rockefeller. Forward-looking statements, including those presented herein, are inherently uncertain, as future events may differ materially from those reflected, and past performance is not a guarantee of future performance.